Hello and welcome to my tutorial for Warrior. Warrior is a tank that can be very, very good if played correctly. For instance, you can tank a lot of bosses without healers and without kiting. And without pots, healing pots at least. And that's fucking nuts. But if you get into a shard dungeon, even a high shard dungeon with a warrior, chances are you're not going to see warrior at its best, or even see warrior at a medium to high degree of competency. And that's mainly due to the fact that warrior is very rarely played, and when a class is not really played very much, the amount of knowledge and the amount of help that you can get, it's just not there. All the people who know every little trick about warrior either are playing paladin because they know that it does more damage and is more useful in more situations, or they are just not playing the game anymore. Old game, everyone played warrior. It was the only tank. Everyone who tanked played warrior, and now a lot of those old game players are gone, so we're stuck with very little information, and the people who do know information about warrior don't really release too much of it, which is why I'm making this guide. I'm making it purely to get the information out there. First, let's start with the journal and the actual abilities that you have as a warrior. I'm going to turn my graphics to ultra. That does not help with the lighting in here at all. I honestly thought it would. Anyway. Combos. You have 4 main combos. The 2 you really need to know are Provoke and Hamstring. Wound is the one you do for kind of solo and leveling. It's for damage. And Cleave is for your AoE attack. But since you're not really attacking as a warrior, learn Provoke primarily and Hamstring next. Charge Strike. If you put your sword 90 degrees out to your side like this, 90 degrees out, it'll charge your sword, and it'll be an empowered combo. The only time this is really good is with Hamstring. Hamstring really benefits from it, giving you a really potent slow equivalent to Frost 3 or better without diminishing returns. Doing it multiple times in a row will make it take longer each time until you cannot do it. Sword Rush. Point your sword at an enemy by pulling the trigger button, release it, and you'll teleport to the enemy. There are 2 talents for that. One which gives you 2 sword rushes, double the cooldown, and lets you sword rush to allies. The other allows you to get a critical strike bonus when using the sword rush. Shield Bash. Hold trigger, and then just smack your shield. It's your main interrupt because it's a stun. You use it primarily to delay attacks, and I'll get more into that when I'm going over bosses. Warrior Horn. It is your taunt. It's your aggro book, whatever you want to call it. It puts you a set amount of aggro above the person with top aggro. That includes yourself. So if you're very confident you're not going to, if you're an arrogant tank and think you're not going to lose aggro, just pop the thing on cooldown and you'll get a little tiny boost of aggro. Speaking of aggro, Sword Rush does have 1 extra buff, and there was also something I forgot to talk about: Charge Strike. Sword Rush now has a big aggro boost when you Sword Rush in. It's just how it works now. If I do a combo real quick. There we go. As you can see, that buff goes up. That's a 30% magical damage reduction for like 5 or 6 seconds. It's like 6 seconds. And it's not very much used yet. We're still finding things to use it on. Mistkeeper is going to be your best bet for the Charge Strike magical damage reduction because of the green phase dot. Sword Rush aggro you don't really use it unless you're using specific setups for your warrior. Now that I've gone over the things I forgot, super ability. You click in both triggers when your yellow bar is full, and it'll replenish all of your shield and give you a buff that gives you a major armor boost. This armor boost gives you a 30% damage reduction on average with +5. Once I have full +6, I can get numbers for full +6 and then make some kind of graph for the amount it actually shields you for. But and that's purely because it boosts armor and mana shield, and that's the buff it gives, a mana shield buff. That's the buff icon at least, and it's the same type of buff, just more powerful. And it's based on your armor stat how much damage reduction you get. So basically, doing it like this, doing this would allow for it would allow us to get better numbers for the super ability armor boost. But with +5, it's around a 30% damage reduction, which is massive. So the strat with the ult is you use it, and then you take as many body hits as possible. And you want your shield to be broken to get as much value out of it. Take as many normal body hits as possible, and you'll barely be taking any damage because, I mean, you're 20% off of being just a paladin at that point with better healing. Once it runs out, obviously swap back to taking shield hits. When it comes to damage, do long arching swings. If you don't do long arching swings, you won't get as much damage. You're not doing this in endgame. In endgame, you're doing small little kind of circles with your sword in order to provoke as fast as possible. Large shield will reduce your outgoing damage, meaning you'll do less damage. They did buff warrior damage by 40% across the board, nerfing small shield as well, a small bit, but it's still overall more damage. But the large shield can take more hits. If you're in a 15, this is like barely even true. It's like 2. You get like an extra hit or 2. But the small shield will definitely break in anything higher than a 7 in one hit, and it increases your outgoing damage. There is no point in running small shield in tanking jobs, and small shield is really only ever used for soloing shit. When you're doing grinder as a warrior for some reason. Blocking attacks increases your aggro generation. So if an enemy hits your shield, you'll get more aggro. Pretty simple. One thing that it does not really tell you about the shield, though, and about combos, is you can do the provoke combo, which gives you more aggro. It's your main aggro generating combo, and that's part of the reason why we spam the thing. But if you put up your shield and keep provoking, you notice how I'm doing no damage, but I'm still getting my tile procs, meaning I am actually provoking. But you can do any combo through your shield and still get the bonus effect. That is not true for wound, and it's not really true for cleave, unless you charge them. Any charged combo will go right through the shield and just do damage. That's warrior abilities. Now let's get into gear. I'm using a +6 with charge strikes and bending. The reason we run charge strikes and bending, if my hand could stay still so it could appear. There we go. The reason we run charge strikes and bending is charge strikes gives more crits, and unbending is a panic save when you die. It's basically like every like minute or two, whichever one it is, it saves you from death and puts you on 1 HP instead. It's very useful for tanks. I view it as a crutch, personally, but there's nothing else that's good for aggro or healing on Warrior. Charge Strikes is the only thing that affects your aggro and healing. And aggro by slight, mainly the healing. Next, rings depends on what build you're running. You're either running Scavenged Rings for the Crit Strike and the Vitality, or you're running Lamvora Rings for the Wisdom. Both are good choices. I prefer the Crit Strike of the Scav Rings, though. Healing Bracer, self-explanatory. Also replace this with a Bracer Wisdom. It's very much recommended by me. If you have a competent healer, you'll want to change this to a Wisdom Bracer purely to get the extra. You will get more ults, and more ults means you take less damage, and you can panic more and panic button more. Ults are really good on Warrior, especially considering shield hits equal aggro. The more shield hits you get by just making your shield regenerate fully, the better. Next, armor. I always am running Crit Strike, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, and I'm running variations on 5 a second Provoke Heal, that's the leftmost one is the Heal, the middle one is 5 a second, and the right one is the Provoke. I run that because that's general Warrior tiles. You should be provoking at 5 per second to get the maximum amount of provokes per second at 1 and 2/3 provokes per second. You can't go faster than that because you're capped at 5 swings a second. It's like that on all my armor. Defense and Vitality, just get them as high as you can. These are my new +6 shoulders. I got them rolled and tiled properly as well, so that's the entire reason why my armor is different from my normal armor. Is I don't have or the Chaos Lavender to dye all my armor, and as such, this is how I look. Anyway, as for ring affixes, Empowered and Elite Hunter is what I run because I don't have a second set of rings. You could always change Elite Hunter to Elite Protector to take less damage against elites, which, as a tank, I highly recommend. But other than that change, not really much you can change there. Next is the talents. There are these two talents, the level 15 and the level 21s, can be interchanged. I'm actually running not my preferred talents. Give me a second to grab a Forgetfulness. Okay. So, Tier 1, Righteousness versus Rage. Righteousness makes your Provoke heal you, and Rage makes your wound do a bleed. Bleed is based on whatever proc the bleed, and in this case it's the wound combo procking it. So it's a decent bleed, but since you're not doing damage, and healing even in solo content is just really good, you go with Righteousness. For the kind of same reason, you'll go Improved Slam over Shield Spike. Improved Slam makes the enemies take an increased amount of damage from all sources, which is only basic strikes and wound combo. It's a no-brainer there. Tier 3 is not as clear-cut. You have Improved Rush, which is double cooldown, but you can double the charges, and you can Sword Rush to allies, versus Intimidate, which is your critical strike chance. Now, the immediate gut reaction is to go Improved Rush. It sounds like it actually does something for Warrior, because, Crit Strike, you'd think from the previous two, oh, I don't do damage, I don't need crits, let's go with Improved Rush. Now, Improved Rush is not a bad talent. It is a very good talent for kiting and different ways of playing the game. I don't personally do much kiting anymore. No bosses really require kiting anymore. So, I run Intimidate instead. and that might be confusing, but there is a small mechanic in the game that not only your main attacks can be crits, but your heals can also be crits. That's why we run charge strikes on Musketeer. It's a guaranteed crit every X attacks. After using your Sword Rush, you gain a buff which increases your critical strike chance. It increases it by 250 points, where each 15 points is 1%. Put the math in the description to tell you exactly how much Intimidate gives you in terms of crit chance, but it's over 10%. It's like closer to like 20%. It's nuts. Next, Blessing of Protection versus Blessing of Might. Blessing of Protection allows you to get a shield buff, like a Musketeer shield or a Bard Instrument of Protection shield, equivalent to your lost health. So if you're on 1 health, if you just unbent and you use it, you have all of your health minus 1 as a shield. Very good, the most powerful shield in the game. The one thing to be careful with it, though, is any other shield, so Bard shield or Musketeer shield, will overwrite it. If you use your Blessing of Protection and then the Bard Protection instrument procs, you'll get an 8k shield instead of like a 100k shield. I know, really bad. It's mainly for that reason I run Blessing of Might, but the other reason is Blessing of Might is just flat 10% extra damage to everyone around you for 10 seconds with a minute cooldown. Both of them have a minute cooldown, which is why Blessing of Might is what I run. Next, you have Counterattack versus Overheal. Counterattack blocking your shield with... I thought I heard someone. I'm in my player house. I don't know why I heard someone. Blocking an attack with your shield instantly charges your sword with the previous combo. You get like an extra provoke out of that. What I used to run, because I thought back in the day, Overheal will fuck up your shield rotation, and that is correct. Overheal will fuck up your shield rotation, and a fucked up shield rotation is going to hurt really bad if you're not good at Warrior. But Overheal can give you more shield hits, and more shield hits means more aggro, and therefore you run Overheal. Overheal is also what allows you to do certain bosses without ever taking damage, / being able to do it without a healer. Those are my talents, and I've already explained that thoroughly. Now I should get into how you tank general things as a warrior. If you Sword Rush in, you personally always Sword Rush in because of Intimidate. You get that extra 250 crit strike. And then you start provoking, using this dummy as an enemy example. You Sword Rush on cooldown, and then you stun after the enemy hits. I'll show that in an actual dungeon. But you basically do that. You hold your shield in front of you and you provoke. That's the basics. There are more complicated things to do with Warrior, like how to deal with bigger groups and things like that. But for sake of simplicity, 2 or less enemies, you put your shield up, poke through it while blocking every attack. If you're feeling fancy, take shield hit, body hit, because the main method for Warrior is you want to balance your health and your shield bar nearly equally. You want your health to be as high as possible, but still taking damage. What that does is that lengthens the amount of time you have shield up. So if I take just only shield hits, it'll deplete twice as fast. Whereas if I take alternating, I'll get less aggro, but my shield will be prolonged for longer, which in a lot of cases is much better than anything else. So just remember, balance these 2 bars. They are your most important bars. Balance them accordingly. That's basically all I can really tell you for just the basics. Provoke through your shield if you're tanking. Otherwise, small shield, do the wound combo. And you get more damage out of just doing it fast. So just kind of do it as fast as possible while doing as wide swings as possible. That's it for just basics, but now I have to get into the more nitty-gritty details, the specifics. And the specifics can be ugly. What I'm first heading to is the sewer. The bosses and how to tank them will be in a separate video. One single separate video where I go through each of the bosses in the game, excluding raids. Raids I won't show, I will just explain and go to said bosses. Except for Citadel, because Citadel's a bitch. Mainly because the bosses do not spawn until previous boss is killed, so it's hard to actually make a guide like that unless you're on a raid. Right here, this is a perfect group to explain. Here, on a 15, this group hurts really badly. It's 3 melees, one of which is elite. There are, remember before how I said 2 or less enemies you always block? Well, this is 3 enemies, and 1's elite. So, the main strategy for either 3 enemies, or 3 enemies, 1 elite, or more, and the same goes for 1 normal melee and 1 elite melee, is you want to block the highest hitting enemy. In this case, that is that elite rat back there. He does the most damage, so he's the one we block. If it was 3 normal melees, you'd block 2 of them and let the 3rd one hit you, kind of like the skeletons on Lich King. And then if it's 4 or more, there's only 1 group right now, from what I remember, if that is 4 or more in just 1 group, at least in dungeons, and that's the 2 elite melee, 2 non-elite melee group over there that has a caster as well. It's a really awful group. Block the elites. They are what's going to kill you. And there are multiple strategies for taking down that group safely. So how I do this group, sword rush in and block this guy. Get some shield hits on the rest of the rats. Get 2 shield hits and then ignore them. If your DPS pulls off of you on the elite rat, or the non-elite rats rather, these guys, they're not going to die, mainly due to the fact that they don't hit hard enough, even on a 15, as long as you have a musketeer. Alternatively, you can try to keep aggro on all of them, But it's the principle of splitting aggro. It's much easier to tank 2 enemies than it is to tank 3 enemies. Wow, that we turned this into the awful group on accident. So this is an allegory for the awful group. Here, I have to guard like this. It's all because the enemies love to stack up with each other. But you can see how hectic it's gonna be. But, general rule of thumb with 4 or more, just try to survive as long as possible. Leave me alone, damn. Bruh, leave me alone. Thank you. Anyway, as I was saying, do your best to guard 2 or 1 enemy at a time, not all 3. That's general rule of thumb for these groups. Prioritize guarding elites over non-elites. And that's the more advanced kind of guarding you have to kind of know. There is one other strategy that is very important, but we'll get to that in a bit. For anything that is a bolter / non-melee, you ignore them. That's not your job. That is the DPS's job to deal with. They deal with the flyers, they deal with the staff boys. The only time you actually don't ignore the staff boys is if they are void, if they are the purple ones. The purple ones put a link shield on, and if you can, shield bash that, so you can interrupt it so the DPS can keep doing their job. Tanks will tell you, oh, you should grab the flyer, and then those tanks will then ignore the melees. That is completely wrong. Those melees, they do way more damage than the bolts. Yes, you can keep your brain dead DPS alive from bolts, but is it really important to keep your DPS alive from bolts if they are getting completely dominated by two rats that are going to hit pretty damn hard for non-tanks? I didn't think so. If in a high shard, your DPS cannot dodge bolts, they're not good players, and they shouldn't be on that 15. Pure and simple. And that's kind of the target priority of Warrior. Ignore flyers, ignore casters, go straight for the melees. Prioritizing elites. Like I said, bosses will be in another video. I have one other thing to go over. And it comes with the prompt, what if you lose aggro to an elite melee? Well, if you have someone who's doing like fucking 200k, probably ranger ult, and they just start completely just doing so much damage that you can't keep aggro. Well, first things foremost, you yell at them to stay still. You keep yelling at them, because DPS's immediate response to big bad elite on a 15 running at them is run like a... They have paladin tanks. They can't do this. So they're scared. Yell at them to stay still. Like, do everything in your power to tell them to just stay put. Get to them and get kind of behind them. You want to be behind them with the boss over there. And put your shield through kind of like this. You don't want... So if I was the person getting guarded, it would look something like this. See how I can't see my shield nearly at all? Alternatively, the shield would be up here. But see how it's not in my main field of vision? It's not as jarring. Keep in mind, the natural DPS response will still be to jump back. So you might want to put it in front of them like this and then do that, so they know that they have a shield in front of them. Or if they're paying attention, they'll just know. Either way, this will guard against attacks. You may think, well, I don't have aggro. How does it guard? There's a funny quirk with the shield, in that, imagine an enemy is sending an invisible ray towards the player. If that ray hits a shield, the shield will take all the damage, and whoever the intended target is won't. It just so happens that that includes other players, because the shield interrupts that line and therefore takes the damage. This is the best allegory I can think for it. That's why we kind of put the shield through this in order to guard them from attacks so they can keep attacking. After like a couple shield hits, like have your horn in your hand, 2 shield hits, horn, sword rush in. And that should give you, and then start provoking like mad. That should give you enough aggro to hold the aggro. If it doesn't, just jump right back to your DPS friend and just guard them until it dies. That's that's how you guard for people. There's a reason also that we put it in at an angle and not forward. If I was a DPS, imagine so POV, you're an old game player and you know about warrior guarding. You already know that it exists and you know you have a warrior tank. So an enemy starts running at you, so you stand still. The warrior comes up behind you and you're casting, or attacking, and then suddenly you see just a giant blue shield in front of you. That's pretty jarring and would make you hesitate or like do anything other than DPS for a slight few seconds. It's not much, but it is jarring and it's harder to cast, especially if the shield's pretty far in front of you. If they instead put it in at like an angle, pretty high, so it's in your actual like vision, but not like directly in front of you like this, it's much easier to see, it's much easier to do all that. It's more quality of life for And that is the General Warrior Guide. As a recap, gear. This is my gear. Charge strikes and bending. Scav or Lamvora rings. Empowered Elite Hunter or Elite Protector. Healing or Wisdom Bracer. I didn't actually go over the fixes on my armor. I'm running crit damage, crit chance. You could also run minus incoming crit damage and supercharge gain, whatever method you're planning on running, whatever kind of build you're running. Other than that, 5 per second heal and provoke tile variations. You want about 3 of them. My helmet is just a paladin tile, and then my sword is a wound tile in case I accidentally get wound, like a charged wound or something like that. Talents. Righteousness, improved slam, improved rush or intimidate, blessing of protection or blessing of might, and then overheal. If anything, just don't take these 3 talents. Other than that, provoke through your shield to maximize aggro. Guard 2 enemies at a time, prioritizing elites. Ignore flyers, flyers and casters, even if they are elites. And then finally, guard for players. Warrior, usually indecisive. That's my main bits of warrior. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I will try to fulfill the questions accordingly. Thank you, and remember to practice your afflictions, frosts, and fireballs.